And with us this morning, we have a Republican presidential candidate whom you did not see on stage at the Iowa debate, but who is running, and he has been gracious enough to join us today. It's Representative Thaddeus McCotter. Mr. McCotter, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Let me say, first of all, I have to confirm this. I follow a lot of journalists on Twitter, and the other day, I think it was Sunday, after the straw poll, one of them said, just saw Thad McCotter in the Des Moines, Iowa airport. He was reading Guitar Player magazine. This is not your typical presidential campaign. Is that fair to say?
Well, I don't know who reads Guitar Player magazine in the field, but it seems like the thing to do at the Des Moines airport. I'm taking great exception to the 40 greatest leads in all of rock and roll history.
What was the best one, by the way?
Well, they had in there, I think some of them were very worthy. You know, Scotty Moore's playing on That's All Right Mama, or Hendrix, obviously, with All Along the Watchtower. But every now and then when you get some of these things, they start putting people in just so they can show how much more attuned they are with music than the average reader. And I don't know if that translates into the popularity of the lead and the influence.
Do you have your own candidate for greatest lead in rock history?
Well, I don't, because I think that's one of the things about music that we understand, which is different than politics, is a lot of it is opinion. And you can't argue an opinion, but it's like when you talk about the president on his bus tour or some of the things that he lays out, we can have significant differences with them based on policy, which are more based on reason and fact.
Well, let me ask about your campaign. And the one thing I would really like to hear from you today is how your candidacy or how your positions, your platform, differs from that of the other candidates. I mean, what distinguishes your platform from the ones that we were hearing the other night on stage in Ames?
Well, I think as I tried to point out in the straw poll speech which I gave, is we have to understand that we're in a deflationary period of time. Obviously, it has painful recessionary effects on individuals. What we're going through is more akin to what happened to Japan in the 90s rather than an average traditional recession. The debt overhangs in both the government, obviously, and within the banking community over on Wall Street are the same types of problems that they ran into there, where they didn't follow our advice, and unfortunately neither did we. So in that sense, I believe that we have to get the banks to recapitalize. Debt for equity swaps, watch out for them, do what James A. Baker said, the third said, former Secretary of Treasury under Reagan, is the ones give them a real stress test, and the ones that aren't healthy have to be broken up, their assets segmented off. You have to watch the leverage limits so they never collapse again. If we don't do that, then the credit's not going to flow down to the entrepreneurs and workers who need to grow this economy. We can have tax relief, which is necessary. We can have regulatory relief, which is necessary. We can have an all-the-above energy strategy, which is necessary. But the credit is the key to getting the economy growing in the near term and allowing the entrepreneurs and workers to shape it for the long run. Secondly, I think that we have to have a far more serious approach to our dealings with communist China. This is a country that is engaged in every manner of trade violation they can do against them. They have to be treated as a comprehensive whole. Their strategic ambitions, much as we see, especially starting with their aircraft carrier to commence their development of a blue water navy, is something that we have to continue to watch, and we're not seeing that out of this administration. Finally, I think that we have to make sure that we have a comprehensive approach to what we're doing in the Middle East, not only with Iraq and Afghanistan, with our troops on the ground, and be able to defend that in a country that is increasingly very war-weary, but we have to continue to support the Green Revolution in Iran. We have to support the revolutionary movements toward freedom in Syria, the same way that Ronald Reagan did in terms of supporting solidarity and the other freedom movements within Eastern Europe, because the implosion of the tyrannical Iranian regime and the implosion of the barbarous Assad regime in Syria are the best way to avoid any type of military confrontation between ourselves or our ally, Israel, and those nations.
Let me ask you a question that was asked of the candidates at the Fox News Washington Examiner debate on Thursday night, which was actually, I asked it of Senator Santorum. The super committee is getting down to work. Democrats will demand that there be some mix of higher taxes along with spending cuts. And I asked Senator Santorum, is there any combination, any ratio of cuts to taxes that you would accept? $3 spending cuts for $1 in new taxes, 3-1, 4-1, 10-1. Is there anything that you would accept? How would you have answered that question?
Well, the answer is no. And what I think is very frustrating, especially for the people who are trying to get back to work, out of the 14 million unemployed or the 30 million that are looking for better jobs so they can move, which would also allow younger people to come into those positions, is the fact that the Democrats went on that historic spending bender. And now what they want to do is they want to come back and they want to tax and spend again. You've already heard, Byron, them talking about more stimulus spending. So they're already signaling that once they raise taxes, further hurt this economy, they're going to go right back to even more spending. So to me, the balanced approach is to stop the spending, allow tax relief, and allow the economy to grow the base revenues for the government, not to raise the tax rate on working people.
Is the foundation for your answering no, though, is it a belief that's shared by many Republicans that these cuts are illusory, they really won't happen? Or is it just a fundamental disagreement that even if the cuts were to take place, even if they did, which they haven't in the past, but even if they did, you still would not want any increased taxes?
I'm 45. Every time they raise taxes, they spend that and more. That's the history, and we're in the 21st century now. The welfare state model is imploding around us. They're feeling it at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. And what's going to happen is they continue to try to prop it up with spending as they did with the stimulus or with taxes as they're trying to do now. They're going to continue to keep American productivity and America's entrepreneurial genius bottled up beneath an outdated, vertical, highly centralized model of government. It's no longer operative.
What about the debt ceiling? Now, Representative Bachmann was asked about that at the debate. And the question was, I mean, would you have been prepared, Governor Romney was asked as well, would you have been prepared to let whatever happen after August 2nd or whenever the deadline really was, but when the United States could not meet its obligations, would you be prepared to just let that happen?
No, and I voted for the debt ceiling deal. Obviously, it was not what we had wanted. The House always wanted the cut cap and balance proposal. But the thing that we've noticed with the downgrade is the detrimental effects it's already had on the struggling economy, the stagnant economy. And I believe that it would have had disastrous ramifications had we simply defaulted on our obligations, which I believe would have happened. We also have to look at the history of the United States, and I think that we did not want on our record of liberty and self-government the fact that America the Beautiful became America the Bum who would not pay her bills. And
so what does that say? A number of your fellow Republicans in the House were willing to go there. What does that say?
Well, I think that one of the things about being a Republican that I enjoy that is far different than being one of the leftists is the fact that we understand that reasonable minds will differ in the application of our principles. So I respect the prudential judgments of my colleagues, and I make my own, and we see what happens.
But you do feel that what would have happened, quickly here, what would have happened if the United States had gone past that point and not raised the debt ceiling?
Well, I think clearly what we saw with the downgrade from Standard & Poor's would have been emulated across the board. I think we could also have seen trouble with people holding U.S. debt, starting to dump them. And I don't think that would have had any type of benefit. I don't know how we could have grown the economy by going into default.
And would it have led to a partial government shutdown?
Well, I think it would have had to if you would have had to do some of the prioritization of the spending. But we don't know precisely what would have occurred in terms of what would have been shut down because that would have involved the executive branch and everything else. In the final analysis, my concern with the stagnant economy that I still can't see any positive benefit of coming out of the United States, both in the historical record or in the immediate present period of time where it's going to help grow this economy. All
right. Representative McCotter, could you stay with us for one more block? We got to go to some commercials now. Okay, we're going to come back in a couple of minutes with Representative Thaddeus McCotter, a Republican presidential candidate. He'll be with us right back after this. Bill Bennett's Morning in America.
Refreshing, intelligent talk. It's Bill Bennett's Morning in America.
Good morning. It is Bill Bennett's Morning in America. Bill has got the day off. This is Byron York of the Washington Examiner and WashingtonExaminer.com. In talking about President Obama's bus tour through the Midwest. His non-political, have to stress, non-political, just looks that way, but it's not really political, bus tour through the Midwest, as well as Republican politics. And we are joining again Representative Thaddeus McCotter, who is running for president as a Republican and has been hitting the campaign trail recently. Thanks again, Representative McCotter, for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Let me ask you, where are you right now, by the way?
Right now I'm in Michigan. We're going to start fundraising events here. Then it's off to New Hampshire, and then it's back to Iowa.
Well, tell me, what kind of reception have you been getting on the campaign trail? Because I think it's fair to say you've probably gotten less media coverage than most of the other candidates.
I think that's a very fair statement.
Okay, that's fair.
But obviously you're bucking the trend.
But, I know. You've had 20 minutes on Morning in America, so that's not nothing, as they say.
Oh, and I'm most appreciative. But Byron, what you get is, you have to. The beauty of the caucus system in Iowa is that they expect you to come to them. They expect you to meet them, look them in the eye, explain what your positions are, and then they'll make their determination. So I think that's one of the things that came out of the straw poll, which I always treated as an introduction rather than a test of organization, given the late entry of my candidacy into the campaign. What you find is that they're willing to listen. And after the straw poll, what happened was people were asking us to come out to their Republican groups, and it's building out from that. You just have to go through it. Obviously, I was disappointed I wasn't in the debate, but you play through it, and you try to maximize the opportunity to get the message out.
Right, and you weren't in the debate. Now, I'll say I was a panelist on the debate, but do not set the policy. But Fox had a long-standing policy that candidates had to reach a certain point in support, as evidenced by 5 polls. So that's why you weren't in the debate. Now, question: how are people reacting? Are they dissatisfied with the Republican field that they have right now?
I think they're not settled. It's a volatile electorate, both obviously for the primary, but it'll also be for the general. It's a very difficult period of time. So what they want to do is hear as many voices as they can, and they'll make their determination. So I think that unlike past primaries where people have pretty much had their mindset between a set number of candidates heading in, right now they want to listen. They're very attuned, and then they'll make their determinations. And I think that's why somebody like Governor Perry, who in the past would have had difficulty entering at this late period of time, found that he was able to. Still have other candidates, notably Governor Palin, that still would be able to make an entry into the race because people are willing to listen.
So from what you're hearing amongst people in Iowa and New Hampshire, the race is still fluid enough that people can still get in.
Well, I think that's the case, and I think Governor Perry's proven that. He's made a big splash in the race. Candidacies like mine, we have to take more of a marathon view of it. But I think that that's what they want to do. They want to make sure they get it right because there's 2 things, as you know, Byron, that they want to do. They want to pick a standard bearer that they can agree with, but they also definitely want to make sure that this is one of the last bus tours President Obama was able to take as Commander-in-Chief.
Now, Perry has very famously lined up lots of Republican big money donors on his side. I think it's also fair to say that you don't have all of those donors. How do you conduct a campaign without that kind of big money?
Well, at this point in time, it's still a grassroots campaign, and we're seeing that, again, because it's a caucus state in Iowa. You will need the money as you get closer to the caucuses. But you also have the same situation in New Hampshire where people take their responsibility as the first primary in the state very seriously. And it's a state where they expect you to come to them. So you can put up all the ads and all the money in the world, but if you don't go see those voters and they don't agree with you, you're not going to get anywhere. And hopefully we'll see whether in this day and age, especially as I said, with the public and the electorate attuned to what you're saying, whether or not the message precedes the money. Because as we noted recently, we've had a lot of people with a lot of money not get anywhere.
All right, Representative McCotter, thanks so much for joining us. Actually, before we go, what's your next campaign stop?
Well, I'm going to be out in New Hampshire, going to be at the Lobster Bake with the New Hampshire Young Republicans.
And where in New Hampshire will that be?
Oh, I'm not quite sure. I have to check that. I know that right now. It's going to be along the coast.
It's a small state. You can get there from anywhere. Representative Thad McCotter, thanks so much for joining us on Morning in America. We'll be back. Want to hear from you. 866-680-64